Okay, so we're going to talk about carbohydrates. Now, the most important carbohydrate is glucose, and that has the formula C6H12O6. And you're probably very familiar with that from GCSE. Now, glucose is used in respiration, of course, and you get CO2 and water, and that provides energy. And that is the main way in which cells generate ATP by oxidizing glucose, right? But also it's important because it can be used to form polymers. Okay, now the two polymers it can form are, so you get several thousand glucose molecules together, joined together, covalent bonds, and you can form starch. But also it can form a different polymer, which you've also heard of, which is cellulose. Which makes up the cellulose cell walls. Cellulose is an important structural molecule, whereas starch isn't really a structural molecule, it's just a supply of glucose in a stored form, and that's used for respiration. So anyway, let's have a look at the chemical structures of glucose. We need to know about them. Right, if you remember then, the carbon always forms 4 bonds. Hydrogen always forms 1 bond. Oxygen always forms 2 covalent bonds. And if you've got a double bond, such as that one there, that counts as 2. Okay, so all the carbons are forming 4 there in this molecule. All the hydrogens are forming 1, and all the oxygens 2. I've drawn the OHs out properly to show all the bonds, but very often they'll be drawn like this. It's much more convenient, just write OH, but just remember there is a covalent bond between the oxygen and the hydrogen there. Okay, so you may have seen this linear form, okay, of glucose, and you may have seen this ring form. And how can one molecule have 2 different forms? Well, we'll see that, and we'll see how in a minute. But the ring form there. So I've drawn it here. You call that a displayed formula, where you show. I've shown all the bonds there. That's a bit awkward. So, for example, this bit at the top, very often you'll write that as CH2OH, because and that's how it's written there. Okay, so that's what that means. Now, in this black version here, this shows you a little trying to show you the shape of the molecule. So what we've got is to see these depth lines here. This to show you really you've got 6 things in a ring, which is fairly flat. It's not completely flat. And then you've got these other things like the OHs and the H's sticking up and down from the plane of the ring. So if you looked at it sideways on, you would see, right, that would look sideways on, and you just have OHs coming down, some OHs going up, this CH2OH. This is looking at it end on, a sort of flattish molecule with things sticking up and sticking down. And that's what this black diagram is trying to show. Also, you'll notice there that the black diagram, that you don't show the carbon atoms. Most of the carbon atoms, I've numbered them there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You don't actually draw a C in there because it makes it a bit more messy and difficult to see. Well, I have drawn the one at number 6 there. So just so you know what these diagrams, if you see them in books, what they're trying to represent. Okay, and it is difficult because it's a 3-dimensional structure and you're trying to show it in 2D, flat piece of paper. Okay, let's see how those are related to each other then. Right. Now, have a look at this. You've got 3 different things here. This is if you have glucose in aqueous solution, it dissolves in water, and that's how it will be in most cells, because you've got water inside the cell. You've got 3 different forms, and these green arrows here are showing you this is an equilibrium reaction that you remember from chemistry. So the reactions are reversible, they can go either way. Right, now in water, glucose exists as those three forms. This one is only a very small percentage of it. Most of it exists in the two ring forms. So if you look at the ring forms, they're called the alpha form, which you've got alpha there, and the beta form, and they're extremely similar to each other. The only difference is I've highlighted in red here in the beta, and you can see on that first carbon atom, number 1 there, in the beta form, the OH is sticking up and the H is sticking down, whereas in the alpha form, it's the other way around. That's the only difference there. All the other OHs on carbon atoms, number 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, they're all in exactly the same places in alpha and beta. It's only that end one, number 1, that makes a difference. Also, it's quite important to realize that you can't go directly from alpha to beta. You can't do that. The only way that they can interchange is by going through this linear. So they go back to the linear form and then back to that. So that's the reactions that are happening there all the time. Okay. So you may think, well, what does it make a big difference whether it's alpha or beta? Well, it doesn't if you're just thinking it in terms of something to carry out respirationally. So if you just, glucose respiration, alpha or beta, it doesn't make a big difference. But when you polymerize them, it does. Okay, if you join lots of alphas together, join lots of them together, stick them all together, you'll end up with starch, which is this sort of, it's kind of like a globular sort of molecule in a big blob, and it's really just a store of glucose. Whereas if you get the betas joined together, they form cellulose. Now, cellulose isn't a globular molecule, a big blob. It's a long, straight, linear molecule, and it's like little fibers which all knit together to form like bigger fibers, and it's a very strong structural molecule used to form the cell walls of plants. Okay, you don't have it naturally occur. It doesn't occur in animal cells at all, just in plants. But it's obviously a very important polymer, as every plant cell has a cell wall. Right, let's see how that works then. Let's see how the polymerization works. Right, what I've drawn here is I've drawn 3 alpha glucoses, okay? And I'll show you how they polymerize to form the starch below. So this is a section of the starch molecule. I've drawn 4 there joined together. We've drawn 3 here. Well, what happens is you lose water here. So there's that oxygen and that hydrogen, and just this one hydrogen there. Okay, so H2O comes off there, and you lose a water molecule here as well. Now, because you make water, it's called a condensation reaction. You may have remember condensation polymers in GCSE chemistry. You made water then, so it's very similar to that. And you join them together, and here we have starch. And this little linkage here, so I'll just sort of circle around it. That's called a glycosidic bond. So starch consists of thousands of alpha glucose molecules, all stuck together by glycosidic bonds. Okay, and this can be split up or hydrolyzed. Hydrolyzed means split by water, so you add water back to that glycosidic bond, then you will get back the glucose. Okay, and starch is, as I say, is a storage molecule. Okay, now I could draw the same for beta. What I'm going to do is to show you how different those structures are. Instead of drawing my glucose molecules like that, I'm going to draw them like this. So I'm just going to draw, this is the flat glucose molecule. And the bits we're interested in is, well, yeah, you've got a CH2 sticking, you'll have a CH2 sticking up, CH2OH, but I'm not really interested in that. You've got H's and OH's on, sticking up and down in various places, but I'm really only interested in the bits that are going to form the glycosidic bond. So I'm interested in this OH here, that's on carbon atom number 1. So that's on that one, yeah. And this OH here, okay, which I'm going to draw there, that's on carbon atom number 4. Okay, so if I draw and remember it's flat, so we've just got these flat molecules with the OHs sticking up and down. Okay, I'll just draw 3 of them for the time being. Okay, what's going to happen is you're going to lose water. Here and here. Okay, and you're going to form this polymer. So you're going to end up with, I'll draw it in the right color. And they're going to be linked like this. Like that. Now you can see I've started drawing a bit of a curve to the molecule there, and that's exactly what happens. You get it ever so slight. It's more or less a straight line, but a bit of a curve. So that means when you get the starch molecule growing, it actually starts to spiral round like this and round, and that is what happens to the starch molecule. It forms a spiral shape. Okay, and that's caused by you get a little turn every single one of those little glucose molecules. Now let's see how the situation is different with beta glucose, because that is going to form, this is starch of course, and this is the alpha glucose. Beta glucose forms cellulose, which is different. So right, I'll do cellulose in a different color. Right, now here you have an OH there, and this one, the OH is sticking up here. And what happens is the glucose molecules, in order to polymerize into cellulose, you need to get one that way up, and then you're going to get another one. The other one next to it is going to be upside down in relation to that. And this one here is going to be upside down into relation to those two. So that'll be OH there, OH. And again, it's going to be OH up and OH down. Okay, so that's our glucose molecules, beta glucose molecules, ready to polymerize. Now, if you notice here in the starch situation, they're all the same way up, they're all in the same orientation, and that's because the OHs are both sticking down, so they can do that. In this one, because the OHs are opposite, one's up, one's down, they have to alternate right way up, upside down, right way up, upside down, and so on. Right, so you're going to lose the water molecule there, lose it there, lose it there. And this structure then is going to look like this. So I just draw them. So you're going to have one up, and you have the glycosidic bond down, one up, one down. Now, because you're getting this alternating pattern, you don't get the curve. You don't get the curve like you got in the starch. You get more or less a straight molecule. With cellulose, it's a fairly straight molecule with a bit of a zigzag, but it's straight, not curved. Okay, and that makes all the difference, because rather than forming these spirals, then if you drew your cellulose molecules, they are going to look like this. So you get one cellulose molecule, and it will have lots of OHs sticking off it. And these OHs, they can form intermolecular forces, okay? Not covalent bonds, but intermolecular forces. And it's a particularly strong sort of intermolecular force called a hydrogen bond, which is a bit of a confusing name because it sounds like it's a covalent bond, but hydrogen bonds are not covalent bonds, they're intermolecular forces. You've probably come across them before. You come across them when we were talking about DNA. We're talking about why water has a high boiling point, but they're strong intermolecular forces. So what happens, you get one cellulose molecule here. I'll draw another cellulose molecule next to it in a different color. So there's a purple one. That's got a load of OHs on it, and that's going to form these hydrogen bonds to the next chain. And then you get another cellulose. So you can see here, well, what happens is the cellulose, they form fibers. Okay, you get many cellulose molecules together, and they're quite strongly stuck together with hydrogen bonds, and they form these strong fibers, cellulose fibers, and that is the sort of structural material which makes up cell walls. So that's the difference between starch, which is this globular molecule, and the cellulose, which is a very fibrous molecule. Okay. Just before we finish, a few more things. You'll see that starch can also have some branches in it. Okay, so if you look at, you may see some diagrams of starch. Right, so here's one curly bit, and then you'll have another bit. That's a branch coming off it, and then that'll carry on. Maybe have another branch here. So you get, and maybe another branch there. So you get these branching effects. Now, how does that occur? Well, if you remember our glucose molecule, we've got 6 carbons. So here's glucose. Now that's carbon number 1 there. That's carbon number 4. Most of the glycosidic bonds are between carbon atoms number 1 and 4 in starch. But every now and again, sometimes you've got carbon atom number 6 sticking up there. Okay, carbon atom number 6 on that one, and that can form a bond to number 4 on another molecule. Okay, so if I draw another carbon here, another sort of glucose here, sorry. You've got an OH sticking down there. Sorry, that's not the right one. That's number 4 there. There's an OH there. You've got an OH on number 6, and those two together, they can form a glycosidic bond. You lose water there. I'll just draw that. And so you're going to get a linkage between there, forming a side chain. So, so starch is branched, and the branches are a glycosidic bond between carbon number 1 and carbon number 4 and carbon number 6. And then just talk about the glycogen. Glycogen is also a polymer of glucose. It's a polymer of alpha glucose. And it's found in animals. It's very similar to starch. It's like starch, but it's got more of these branches. It's got more branches. Okay, so apart from that, extremely similar to starch, and it's a storage molecule. It's where glucose is stored in the liver and in the muscles. You may remember that when you're doing about control of blood glucose and GCSE. Glycogen is important for that. Let's just talk about starch and glucose, how they can be broken down. So starch, that can be digested to glucose by animals. So we eat plants that contain starch, we digest it to glucose, no problem at all. Cellulose, it can't be digested by animals. Okay, it can't be digested by animals because they don't have the enzymes to break down the linkage between between two beta glucose molecules, but it can be digested by microorganisms, by some microbes. Okay, and in particular, herbivores like cows and sheep have these microbes in their guts, so that the animal itself can't produce the enzyme. It's got these bacteria which form a symbiotic relationship with the animal, and they digest the cellulose into glucose, and the animal can then use the glucose. So that's why herbivores can just exist by eating plant material, whereas other animals can't.